Good evening. We begin by thanking our sponsors. The sponsors for the month of Kislev are Josh and Becca Friedman, Shmuel Malka Esterson, and the Pepper family in the merit of our Talmud Torah. May all the neshamas have an aliyah, all the cholim who need a refuah should have refuah b'meir b'karov, and all those who need any Yeshua should have and enjoy a Yeshua b'karov. Today's Amud is Berachos, Daf Yud Gimel. We are going to be picking up from the Mishnah on Yud Beis, Amud Beis, 12b. This might be one of the most famous Mishnayos in all of Shas. It is a Mishnah that we say in the Haggadah on Pesach at night, and all the kids have a lot of Divrei Torah to say on this. This is usually when you're starting to get hungry, but you got to have all the Divrei Torah on this Mishnah. So we'll learn it quickly now. This is where it comes from. Mazkirin Yitzias Mitzrayim Baleilos. We have a mitzvah to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim in the evening. Amr Rabbi ben Azariah. Rabbi ben Azariah said, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I am as if I am 70 years old. V'lo zachisi shetei amar Yitzias Mitzrayim baleilos. I never really understood the recitation of Yitzias Mitzrayim in the evenings. Ad shedarsha ben Zoma. Until Ben Zoma made the following drasha. Shenemar, for it says in the pasuk, L'man tizkar yom tzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. It says, so that you will remember the day that you left Egypt, kol yemei chayecha, every day of your life. Now, when the pasuk says yemei chayecha, simply says the days of your life, that includes hayamim, the daytime. Kol yemei chayecha, the added word of kol, the inclusive word of kol, that means halelos. That includes the evening. So therefore, one has to recite Krishma both in the morning for Yemei Chayecha and in the evening because the inclusive word kol Yemei Chayecha. So that was what Rabbi ben Azariah had mentioned. So now, why does it say Harei ani kiven shivim shana? I am like I'm 70 years old. Now, generally speaking, the Tanaim don't usually give us their age when they say something. They make their statements. So why does he say he's like 70 years old? This is the famous, Rashi quotes it over here, but this is the famous story that he was inducted as the Rosh Yeshiva, as the Rav, when he was only 18 years old. Unfortunately, when he was 18 years old, he looked like an 18-year-old, he looked like a kid. And he didn't feel like he had the proper veneer or the proper look to be able to garner the respect that he needed from this Talmidim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu made an ace, and overnight, his beard turned white. He got 18 strands of white hair, he got a gray beard, and with that he looked very respectable. Now there are different understandings of what happened, what that meant. Did it mean that it was just simply an ace that his beard turned white, or perhaps he applied himself to his learning so much in that day that he had stressed himself to the point that his beard turned white. Either way, the bottom line was he looked like a 70-year-old, but he was simply a teenager. Now, the Mishnah continues and says, the Chachamim disagree and say, Yemei Chayach, when the pasuk says Yemei Chayacha, that means Ha'olam Hazeh. Right now, currently, where we are in this world. Kol Yemei Chayacha L'havi Limos Mashiach. The additional word Kol adds in that even when Mashiach comes, we're still going to recite Kriya Shema and thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for taking us out of Mitzrayim. So we have machlokes between Ben Zoma and the Chachamim how to understand the pasuk of Kol Yemei Chayecha. Does Kol Yemei Chayecha, the added word Kol, does that mean one has to recite Kriya Shema, which means Yitzias Mitzrayim, be able to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim in the evening, or does Kol Yemei Chayecha teach us the halacha that even after Mashiach comes, we're still going to say the parasha of Yitzias Mitzrayim every single day? The Gemara goes on. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Amar lahem Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma said to the Chachamim, Ben Zoma told the Chachamim, Chimaskirim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Yemos Mashiach. Is this true that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a mitzvah to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim? V'alo kvar nemar. The problem is, it already says in the pasuk, Hine yamim bayim nuam Hashem. Days are coming, nuam Hashem, before Hashem. V'lo yomru od chai Hashem asher helas b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. People are no longer going to be singing the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for taking them out of Egypt. Why? Because they're going to replace that with Ki'im Chai Hashem Asher Hela Vasher Hevi Es Zera Beis Yisrael Mi'eretz Tzofaina Mikol Aratzes Asher Yidachtim Sham. Ultimately, Klal Yisrael is going to be fascinated by the fact that the Jews are dispersed all over. It says Eretz Tzafona. So Tzafon is the north. So you have people coming from the north, and the truth is from all areas where Jews are dispersed. And everyone's going to be so fascinated that when Mashiach comes, everyone's going to come together from all areas of the world. People are going to be so fascinated by that, they're not even going to be spending time to focus on the nace that took place to take people out of Mitzrayim. So his point is, the pasuk seems to say that your drasha is incorrect. It seems to say very clearly that a point in time will come and people are no longer giving praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Yitzias Mitzrayim, because the nace, the miracles of the kibbutz galios when Mashiach comes, is going to be so much more powerful. Amru lo, they said to him, you're right, the pasuk says that, but lo shetei akir Yitzias Mitzrayim mikoma. It doesn't mean the Yitzias Mitzrayim is going to be completely uprooted and forgotten about. Ela shetei shibud malchios ikar, the nace of shibud malchios that were ultimately we are meshubed, we are tied down, we are committed to different countries and different kingdoms and different dictatorships and different rulers throughout this long galus. That's going to be the ikar of Yitzias Mitzrayim tafalo. Yitzias Mitzrayim is going to be a much smaller or a much less significant miracle. Similarly, we find another concept like this in the Torah itself. What does the pasuk say? We just read this in this past week's parasha. Lo yikare shimcha od Yaakov. You will no longer be called Yaakov. Ki im Yisrael yeshemecha. Your name is going to be Yisrael. So Yaakov Avinu, we refer to him as Yaakov Avinu, but the pasuk says very clearly, we won't call you Yaakov anymore. We'll call you Yisrael. And at the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, the Chachamim explain, Lo shi akar Yaakov mimikomo. Doesn't mean that the name Yaakov is going to be completely uprooted from its place. Elo Yisrael ikar v'Yaakov tafel. The name Yisrael is going to be the main, the primary name, and the other name is going to be a secondary name. You can have a secondary name, which is Yaakov. Now we know we refer to him as Yaakov, but we are called Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, all these things. The primary name is Yisrael, but we still refer to him as Yaakov because his name was still Yaakov. So that's the point. The point is that even though we're going to give primary focus to one name, it doesn't mean that the previous name gets completely abolished. The Chacham say v'cheinu omer. Similarly, it says al tizkuru rishonos v'kadmonios al tavonenu. We will not mention the first ones. The kadmonios al tavonenu, which means al tizkuru rishonos zeh shibud malchios. Don't mention the first ones. That's the shibud malchios. V'kadmonios al tizponenu zu yitzias Mitzrayim. And the next pasuk says hinni oseh chadasha. I'm going to make something new. Ata, right now, titzmach, you're going to sprout. So again, we see the same concept. That means that the previous nisim are going to be paled in comparison to the nisim that will eventually happen, Mirz Hashem, very soon. Tani Rabbi Yosef, zu mechemes Gog uMagog. That he was referring to is the Mechama, the war of Gog uMagog, and the nisim that are going to take place, the Mechama of Gog uMagog, where ultimately Klal Yisrael will prevail, and Mashiach will come, that those nisim are going to be so dramatic that they will make the other nisim look like they were pale in comparison. And the Gemara gives an example. What is this comparable to? A person who's going along the way. What happens? A wolf jumps out and is about to attack him. He was saved. He's able to save himself and not get attacked by the wolf. He's walking around, he's telling all his friends, you heard this crazy story happen, I was traveling along the road, and this wolf jumped out at me, it was so dangerous, he almost got attacked, he almost got maimed by this wolf, and, he keeps telling the story wherever he goes. But guess what happened? A little while later, Pagabo Aryeh. Same thing happened, except this time it was a lion. So now, he was saved from the lion. He tells all his friends this crazy story that happened with a lion. I was going along the road, I was traveling, it was with my friends, with my family, this lion just jumped out, it was crouching like yesterday's Gemara, it was just crouching there and jumped up, and then he's all pressed with the story. And then what happens? Pagabo Nachash, a venomous snake, shows up and is about to go ahead and just give one little bite and put its venom into him. You know what happens if a person gets attacked by venom? It's terrible. In moments, the person's whole body can become poisoned. He's telling the whole story. V'nitzal mimenu. He's saved from the snake. Then what happens? So then what happens is, Shachach Ma'aseh Shneim, he forgets about the lion and the wolf, by Mesaper V'holach Ma'aseh Nachash. He goes ahead and tells the story of the snake. Now, Af Kach Yisrael, the same thing is true with Klal Yisrael, Tzaros Achronos Mishkachos El Rishonos. The first tzaros are going to be forgotten after the second ones. In other words, the bottom line over here is that it doesn't mean that the Klal Yisrael will no longer remember the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Of course we'll remember the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We'll still thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for taking us out of Mitzrayim. But the more recent, more profound miracles that will happen will ultimately take over as the primary miracles that we'll spend our life talking about. The Gemara goes on. Avram, who Avraham? Avram is Avraham, but Chila Nasa'av la'Aram. Initially, Avram Avinu, he was just the king of Aram Narayim. He was a locally known guy, a pretty good guy. Everyone knew him, and he was like the father of the nation. Ulebesof, after he was so successful, he became internationally renowned. Ulebesof Nasa'av la'Chola Olam Kulo. He became the father of La'av Hamon Gayim, as the pasuk says. His name was changed to Avraham because he was the father of everybody. The same thing is true. Sarai, he's Sarah. It's the same person as Sarah, but Chila Nasis Sarai Lu'umasa. She was a master to a certain extent of her nation. However, Lu'usof Nasis Sarah L'cholam Kulo. She had jurisdiction over everybody. She became Sarah, a well-known person throughout the whole world. The Gemara continues. Tani Bar Kapara. Kapara teaches. Kol hakori la'Avraham Avram. Anybody who calls Avram over Baaseh, he has violated a positive commandment. Shenamar, for it says in the pasuk, V'haya Shimcha Avraham. Your name shall be Avraham. Rabbi Lezer says over Balav. Not only has he violated in a mitzvahs aseh, a positive commandment, he actually violates a negative commandment in Avera. Why? Shenemar, for it says in the pasuk, V'lo ikare od es shimcha Avram. You will no longer be called Avram. So anybody who chooses to call him Avram is in violation of the pasuk, which clearly states you shall no longer be called Avram. The Gemara says, hold on a second. If that's really true, Elamei ata hakore l'Sara Sarai hachanami. You're telling me the same thing if someone refers to Sarai as Sarai, or I should say, Sarah as Sarai. They violate a lav. Why? Gemara says, no. Hasam kutsha brichu hu Amar Lavram. That was just simply a conversation that took place between Hashem and Avram. And he just told him, Sarai ishdecha, Sarai, your wife, lo tikra es shema Sarai, ki Sarah shema. You should no longer call your wife Sarai, call her Sarah. In other words, there's a private conversation between Kadosh Baruch Hu and Avram. It's not relevant to everybody else. Gemara says, hold on, let's use the same logic. Elamiata kari li Yaakov. If someone calls Yaakov, hachanami, is the same thing true that this person is in violation of the mitzvah in the Torah that he should call him Yisrael? Gemara says, no. Shani hasam, there it's different. Dehadar ahadre kra. The pasuk itself calls him Yaakov later on. L'chsiv, for it says, V'yomer Elokim li Yisrael b'maros halayla. Hashem said to Yisrael in an appearance at night, V'yomer, and he said, Yaakov. He called him Yaakov. So Hashem himself called Yaakov, and therefore we can't say that there's a prohibition against calling him Yaakov. Gemara says, hold on. Master Rabbi Yosef bar Ovid, v'itemer Rabbi Yosef bar Zavida. We have a problem here because there's a pasuk in the Torah that says, Atahu Hashem Elokim, Asher Bacharta, Bi'Avram. We say this every morning, Psukei de Zimra. And the pasuk says clearly, Avram. Why is the Torah itself called Avram, even after his name was called Avraham? Where it says, Amar Le, Hasam Navihu, Dekamesader L'Shevachi Derachmana. There it was one of the Nevi'im, one of the prophets, who was just simply giving Shevach to Avram, my Dahavim Eikara. He was pointing out that you appear to Avram at that point in his life. That was his name. He was telling us a historical fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Avram, and his name, indeed, at that point in time, was Avram. Hadron Alach, Me'emasai, Baruch Hashem, we finished the first parak in Maseches Berachos. Just to speak something out really quickly, it's interesting, if indeed, it seems like Bar Kapara stands, that there's an Isser to call Avram. If you go through all the Moni HaMitzvos, you'll find many different mitzvos. You're not going to find an Isser anywhere in one of the 613 mitzvos which are to call Avram. And the Rishonim are busy with this. Like, why not? The Gemara seems to be very clear that there's a prohibition to call Avram Avinu Avram. So why doesn't it appear? There are various different explanations, but I think the simplest explanation is that, generally speaking, we don't count any lavin that exists before Matan Torah. I think the Richter says this, that if a lav was listed before Matan Torah, we don't count it. Gid Hanasha is an exception because it's repeated, but ultimately that's the answer. I think we'll stop here for tonight. And Emir Hashem, tomorrow we'll start the new parak. So tomorrow, Wednesday nights, I have a little bit of I have a conflict at this time. I'll post on the group what we'll do. Either I'll figure it out or I'll post a recording for tomorrow evening. All right? Have a wonderful evening.